Two mummies in the Takori rock shelter in Libya, North Africa, reveal a human lineage that lived in isolation in the Green-Sahara until 7,000 years ago. What calls attention is that these mummies, even not being sub-Saharan, do not carry the assumed Neanderthal-Fraction. The isolated group in the Sahara they belong to, together with many other facts, once more proves wrong that out of Africans, or Africans for that matter, interbred with Neanderthals as hypothesized by consensus. This roughly 50,000 years ago. This group, on top of several other groups and populations, prove that even by 7,000 years ago, that they did not carry at all the assumed Neanderthal fraction. If you consider that Europe, Western Eurasia, and significant parts of Africa will be turned over soon after around 4,500 years ago. This absence of the Neanderthal fraction is quite logic, but the absence as well as the by ancient DNA proven massive turning over of populations are destructive for the assumption that the roughly 2% Neanderthal fraction that modern humans are supposedly carrying is forthcoming from interbreeding with Neanderthals somewhere outside Africa, in the range of Neanderthals, this roughly 50,000 years ago. What this proves is that it was not interbreeding that resulted in the supposed Neanderthal fraction that all modern humans carry today. We do not negate that modern humans carry this fraction. We only negate this fraction to be caused by the already extremely improbable interbreeding of out of Africans with Neanderthals outside of Africa. But simple are the DNA of Native Americans that typically carry this so-called Neanderthal fraction. This also proves the population-turning-over group arrived from outside Europe and also from outside Western Eurasia. The only candidate ancestors are the prehistoric Native American ancestor R1 and the Native Americans themselves. Simply because of that, on top of being the only suited candidates, they also carry the Neanderthal fractions that modern Europeans and humans carry today. The Takori people in Libya. Further, there is evidence the Takori isolated group descended from ancestors in Morocco 15,000 years old. 15,000 years ago, still being during the Ice Age. Please note that Morocco once more points to places the Atlantic currents and gyre coming from the Americas land. Further, we mention a rock painting Wadi Takori region that clearly illustrates an advanced Yamnaya-like chariot that is pulled by several horses. Since this indicates that this rock painting was made when the Sahara was still green, this rock painting is at least 5,000 years old, which places the Takori people in Libya and their culture in line with the Yamnaya and steppe pastoralists, including with the same culture and advanced technology. Since the Takori people in Libya certainly did not come from the steppes north of the Black and Caspian Sea, the only candidate origin once again are the Native Americans, which only can arrive crossing the Atlantic Ocean. Further, we mention the typical Amerindian Y-DNA haplogroup Q being present in Algeria, which is immediately to the east of Morocco, and just as Morocco and all places further east in the Mediterranean are an indirect but unobstructed range of the Atlantic currents. The Guanche mummies are related to the Takori mummies in that they both represent ancient populations of North Africa and Europa, specifically Spain, just like the Tartessians and the Basques, with the difference that the Takori were not confirmed to have been present on the Atlantic islands. Nevertheless, the haplogroups they carry are the same, proving them to be related. Both groups carry the Y-DNA haplogroup E. Mitochondrial DNA, mtDNA, haplogroup X is found in North America, Europe, Western Asia, North Africa, and the Horn of Africa. The Takori archaeological site in Libya revealed a basal branch of maternal haplogroup N, from which haplogroup X originated. This indicates that maternal haplogroup X, or its ancestors, were present in North Africa since the early Neolithic period. Genetic studies indicate that mitochondrial haplogroup X originated about 30,000 years ago, shortly before or during the last glacial maximum. The Takori people in Libya, the ancient Moroccans and also the Guanche, all are distinct from both sub-Saharan Africans and other known populations, simply because they were extinct before they could have been turned over like all other populations effectively were. The fact that no ancient DNA of them was ever found, almost for sure means they practiced cremation, this except for the mummies of the elite, just like the Amazon Amerins and some other Native Americans on the other side of the oceans practiced and still practice, again except for the mummies of the elites. The Takori represent a unique, isolated lineage, while the Guanches show connections to Berber and Basque populations. Takori mummification is not well documented, but the Guanches had a distinct mummification process known as mullado. Except for probably some elites, both groups seem to have practiced cremation. So they escaped from our human history, and even from ancient DNA research, largely until the discovery of their mummies. Not directly Berber. The Takori are not explicitly identified as Berber. The term Berber generally refers to the indigenous populations of North Africa, also known as Imazighan. Genetic connection to North Africa. The Takori lineage is important because it provides insights into the genetic history of North Africa, including the populations that eventually became the Berber people. The study suggests the Takori lineage contributed to the ancestry of some present-day North Africans. Berber identity. The Berbers are a diverse group with a long history in North Africa, and their genetic makeup is a result of various migrations and interactions over time. The Takori lineage represents a specific part of that history. Green-Sahara. The Takori remains were found in the Green-Sahara, a period when the Sahara Desert was more humid and habitable. This suggests that the Takori were part of a population that lived in this environment. Resuming. These ancient groups present no Neanderthal-Fraction. While the Green-Sahara should have bridged the Sahara Gap, surprisingly the genetic analysis suggests these ancient North African groups remained largely separate from populations in sub-Saharan Africa. So large-scale migration bringing new people that practiced farming and herding did not occur, for example from the Middle East. mtDNA X arrives in Anatolia roughly 7,000 years ago. This fits with the fact that mtDNA X possibly starts to arrive in Anatolia roughly 7,000 years ago, and goes on, and or increases in intensity, at least until the Sea Peoples raid Egypt, etc. Former early ancient haplogroups would only be largely preserved in Africa, as well as in strongholds like Anatolia, and the Bronze Age cultures more oriented to, and kind of protected by, the Austronesian expansion, including in the case of Egypt, which also was connected by means of access to the Red Sea, to the same Austronesian expansion. The former more early ancient haplogroups would remain most preserved in the Canary Islands, etc., because exactly these islands would no longer be the hubs for and focus of the older migrations and more southerly Atlantic crossings. This so since the later migrations, that would cause the massive population turnover events after 7,000 years ago, would take place through more northern Atlantic routes and currents. Hence the discussed high frequencies of the more early ancient haplogroups in the Canary Islands. Since mummifications were more typical for South America, for the same reasons mummies, mummifications, related cultural practices and the already existing hypogea, etc., would lose functionality, interest and further development and maintenance, and start to deteriorate early on. From the Americas to the facades and water bodies in the east. Widener E and X, and Na L and M coming from the direction of the Americas and landing on the facades and water bodies to the east of the Americas. This further supports out of the Americas, and further confirms the combo of Atlantic expansion, Luzia people, in combination with Austronesian expansion, Lucy, Aboriginals, Signal Y, Denisovan and haplotype B006. Luzia skull, supposedly the oldest human remains found in the Americas, exhibits what are described as African-like or Australasian features, including a narrow, oval cranium, projecting face, and pronounced chin. These features differ significantly from those of modern indigenous Americans, who consensus claims to have descended from populations that migrated from Asia. This video together with other of our videos illustrate and prove that the assumption that they descend from any population outside the Americas is wrong, and that in fact it is all other populations that descend from the Native Americans. The discovery of Luzia and similar skeletons at the Lagoa Santa site has sparked debate about the origins of the first Americans, with some researchers suggesting a connection to populations in Africa, Australia, or Southeast Asia. We claim here again that the Native Americans did not descend from other populations outside of the Americas, but that yes indeed the Native Americans had a connection to populations in Africa, Australia, or Southeast Asia, or rather are their ancestors that migrated through the Atlantic as well as through the Pacific Gyres.